They called it a retirement party after my 37 years as head librarian at the Maplewood Public Library. White roses were on every table, the same kind my late husband used to bring home when we were still pretending our marriage meant something. There was a cake with my name spelled right, which was already more than I expected, and a microphone set up near the punch bowl, though I was never asked to use it. If you're listening to this, please like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment about where you're tuning in from. I sat in the center like part of the decor, smiling for photos that didn't feel real. Later I realized some gatherings aren't about you, they're stages, and sometimes you're just the decoration. For years I'd kept quiet about the $100 million lakefront land my late sister left me. The deed sat sealed in my filing cabinet, untouched, and no one knew, not even my son or his wife, Emily. Thank goodness for that, because halfway through the speeches, the doors opened and in walked Emily with a lawyer in a gray suit and red tie. My son Michael froze, eyes fixed on the floor. Emily marched right up to me, smiled sharp as glass, and dropped a folder in front of me. Since you're retiring, we thought we'd help you manage everything. The lawyer turned the folder toward me, standard authorization, co-managing accounts and property. Michael flinched at the word but stayed silent. I lifted the folder. It wasn't heavy, but the air around it was. They had no clue about the deed. They only wanted my small house, my pension, my modest savings. I set it back down. Calmly, I told them I already had legal counsel, Judith Harper. The lawyer blinked, Emily's jaw tightened, and Michael finally looked at me, stunned. You already talked to a lawyer, he whispered. I nodded, though I didn't say I'd prepared 5 years ago, not from suspicion, but from experience. Emily forced another smile, gathered the folder, and left, her heels echoing like a clock ticking down. Music played again, but the party was already over. That night I sat alone in the kitchen while the cake dried out. I glanced at the old family photo taken before the wedding, before masks slipped and truth came in ink and silence. My hand rested on the locked drawer with the deed. Some celebrations are traps wrapped in compliments, but you still show up, because when the curtain falls, you're the one holding the script. The next morning, white lilies waited on my doorstep. No card, but I didn't need one. Emily adored lilies. Then came a cake, chocolate hazelnut, my favorite, with a note in her handwriting, signed with a smiley face she'd never used before. The gifts kept coming all week. Teas, shawls, candles, soaps, stacked at my door like offerings no one believed in. On the 8th day, her real message arrived with a fruit basket. She called, voice sweet but strained. Did you get the peaches? Michael and I were talking. It must be hard keeping up that big house alone. Winters get rough. Maybe it's time we found you something easier. She suggested selling the house, moving to a condo near them. Dinner together, grandkids nearby. I closed my eyes, not from fatigue but to avoid watching the trap snap shut. Of course it's up to you, she added quickly. We just want what's best. That phrase chilled me. I'd heard it before, from realtors, from doctors. It never meant what it claimed. After the call, I sat in the living room, surrounded by everything they wanted me to abandon. The books I never had time to read, the grandfather clock my husband once fixed, the firewood stacked for autumn. On the mantel sat the one face I still trusted, my sister Claire. Cold to most, but to me, she was proof that strength could be quiet, and gifts could be sharp as secrets. They never saw how she used to braid my hair every morning before school, or slip little yellow post-its into my coat pocket on hard days. When she died, suddenly, fiercely, I found a letter tucked beside the deed in her safety deposit box. Her handwriting was sharp as ever. Don't tell anyone yet. You'll know when the time is right. Observe first. She always said that. I stared at her portrait, those unblinking eyes full of memory. You were always 5 moves ahead, I whispered. I'm trying, Claire. I could still hear her voice from childhood, coaching me at chess. If they're too eager to give, Margaret, ask what they plan to take. I turned from the photo and looked out the window. Across the street Michael's SUV was parked too neatly, one tire kissing the curb. He hadn't come inside, not since the party. I thought back to when he was small, running through this house in mismatched socks, pressing wildflowers into my palm and calling them treasure. His laughter once shook these walls harder than any storm. Now he stood in the shadow of a woman who measured kindness like profit. I wasn't angry, not even disappointed, just quietly gutted. Not because they wanted the house, but because they saw me as a relic to be archived, managed, and eventually liquidated. I walked back to the kitchen, past the lilies, the cake, the tea, and finally understood none of it was a gift. Every item carried strings, invisible threads pulling me towards something I hadn't agreed to. That night I wrote a short note to my attorney, Judith Harper. Let's have lunch soon. There may be documents you'll need to safeguard. No details yet. No one else needed to know. I was still watching. Last Thursday Michael called on video. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. He asked polite questions. Groceries, heat, all the usual things. I answered politely. But halfway through, as I mentioned the new book I was reading, he looked off screen. I heard Emily's voice, sharp and distracted. Then he smiled awkwardly. Mom, I've got to go. I'll call you later. The screen went black before I could say goodbye. I waited, refreshed the app, but nothing. That was 3 days ago. No call. No text. Just silence. And today is my birthday. 69. I didn't expect a party, but I thought I'd at least hear from him. Instead, the only buzz on my phone was a pharmacy reminder for calcium supplements. The day drifted quietly, broken only by wind pressing against the windows like an old friend. I made tea in the same green mug I'd used since Michael was in college. Around 4, the doorbell rang. My heart leapt, but it wasn't Michael or Emily. It was Ivy. She stood there in an oversized hoodie, earbuds dangling, holding a small paper bag. Dad asked me to drop this off, she muttered. Soup from that organic place I like. I thanked her. She didn't look up. As she turned to leave, I barely caught her soft, habitual, "Bye, Grandma." Not warm, not cold, just automatic. I stood there long after the gate closed. She was 15, trying to grow up in a house where softness felt like weakness. But I missed her voice when she was 6, sticky-fingered affection, endless questions. I set the soup on the counter without opening it. Then I sat in the armchair by the window, the one where I used to rock Michael through fevers. The house was quiet, not peaceful, but the kind of quiet that screams underneath. People think old age drifts in like dusk. For me it came like a slammed door. One day you're asked for advice and recipes, the next you're just asked to stay out of the way. I used to be the rhythm of this house. Meals at 7, bills on the 1st, bathrooms on Tuesday, sheets folded the way my mother taught me. When Michael married, I gave them space. The 1st year they came every Sunday. The 2nd, once a month. By the 3rd, only birthdays, always with exit plans. There were always calls, especially when his father fell ill. I nursed that man through his last year, fevers, wheelchairs, spoonfuls of broth when his hands shook too much. Michael came twice. Once with flowers. Once for 5 minutes in a suit on his way to a meeting. Sorry, Mom. Things are complicated. They weren't. Not really. Now this house has settled into a rhythm without footsteps. Ivy drops by when she's told. Emily sends gifts with expiration dates. Michael drifts further into silence. And me? I've grown used to the echo. But that doesn't mean I don't feel it. The world assumes aging means shrinking. It doesn't. I'm still here. Still breathing. Still remembering. Still watching. I used to be the root that held this family upright. They only saw the tree, forgetting I was there under the soil. I traced a finger along the frame of Claire's photo again. I haven't spoken yet, I whispered. But I will. And this time, they'll all hear it. Just after 9 the phone rang. I remember because I'd just settled into my chair with chamomile tea. The room was hushed. The name Emily blinked on my screen. I hesitated. For a split second I thought about letting it roll to voicemail, but old habits die hard. I answered. Hello. Hi, Mom, Emily said, crisp and direct. Not unkind, just stripped of warmth. No small talk about sleep, meals, or the puzzle sitting half-finished on my table. She went straight for the target. I wanted to talk about your living situation, she said. I stayed quiet. Silence makes people show their real hand. You're alone in a house far too big, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, all those stairs. It worries Michael and me. Does it? I thought. Or is it the property value keeping you up at night? She pressed on before I could answer. We think it's time to consider long-term care. God forbid anything happens. Have you thought about who would make decisions for you? Still I said nothing. She paused, then switched tactics. There's a legal document I can send. A durable power of attorney. Simple. You'd name someone, ideally Michael, to manage your finances if anything came up. Nothing changes right away. It's just precaution. Responsible. And convenient, I thought. For her. For anyone circling this house like it's already half empty. I took a slow breath. Emily, I said calmly. Have I ever asked you to manage anything for me? Silence on the other end. Then softly. It's not about that. But it was. We both knew. I appreciate your concern, I said evenly, but if I ever need legal assistance, I already have someone I trust. Another pause. I pictured her frowning, her pitch starting to fray. Well, she said at least think about it. I will, I said, but not the way she hoped. After we hung up, I stared at my blank phone, then opened the drawer beside my chair. Inside was my old leather address book, pages yellowed, names fading. Under H was a name I hadn't dialed in years, Judith Harper, the woman who once stood beside my sister Claire through more legal storms than I could count. Claire always said Judith had a spine of steel and a memory sharper than machines. She never forgot a promise. I called. The phone rang twice. Margaret, she said, warm, alert, like she'd been expecting me. It's been a long time, I replied. Not long enough to forget your voice. I smiled despite myself. I need your help. And I told her everything. The party, the surprise lawyer, the flowers turning to threats, the contract disguised as care, the daughter-in-law who smiled with her teeth but not her eyes. When I finished, silence. Then Judith's voice, steady. I think it's time we had a proper conversation in person. I thought you'd say that. I'll be in town Wednesday. Lunch. Of course. And Margaret? Yes. Thank heavens you kept quiet. I laughed softly. That's exactly what Claire would have said. Judith didn't laugh. She did more than say it. She built a legal wall so high even vultures like Emily will break their wings trying to scale it. That made me smile, but only for a moment. Walls don't stop ambition. They just buy time. Sometimes time is all a woman like me needs. I hung up, placed the phone on the table. My tea was cold, but something else had warmed inside me, not anger or fear, but clarity. The kind that comes when someone shows their cards and you realize you've been holding the winning hand all along. It had been just a month after Claire's funeral when the envelope arrived. No postmark, no return address, just my name, Margaret Collins, written in looping script I'd know in the dark. Claire always said timing was everything. Even in death she was right on time. The envelope was thick, sealed with wax embossed with an owl, her symbol for silent wisdom. I took it to the kitchen table, the same one where we once plotted escapes from childhood and later tried to understand where life had veered. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet in her dancing handwriting. If you're reading this, sister mine, it means I've slipped away first. That thought once scared me, leaving you here without me. But now I see it as a gift. A clean cut. No apologies. No compromises. Just the truth. I stopped, letting the weight of her words settle. You remember the land, don't you? The 300 acres near the valley we used to pass on the way to Grandma Ellis's cottage. It doesn't look like much from the road, but beneath the soil is history. Minerals, zoning potential, silence. Developers are swarming now. It's worth nearly $100 million and growing. My breath caught. I had thought Claire sold that land years ago when her health began to fail. Once I asked, she only smiled and said, "Some things aren't meant for the world to know." The letter continued. I bought it under a quiet trust. I never told anyone, not even my lawyers or the press. Only Judith Harper helped me handle it. If you're reading this, she's already arranged everything as I requested. You're the sole heir. The land is yours. But if you value your peace, your life, your freedom, keep it hidden. Don't speak of it. People circle wealth like vultures. This land can be your salvation, but only if it stays invisible. I closed my eyes. I could hear her voice clear as day, calm, deliberate, knowing. In this world of masks, silence keeps you free. The loud ones fall first. The quiet endure. I folded the letter slowly, as if folding a piece of her back into my life. Judith had confirmed it not long after. The paperwork was flawless. The trust held the land under a name that didn't trace back to Claire. I wasn't listed as an owner, just the beneficiary of an anonymous entity. Not even Michael or Emily knew. Especially not them. Claire had always watched them the way she once studied rivals in a boardroom, quietly, calculating. After one Thanksgiving, she told me, there's a difference between ambition and hunger. Michael isn't ambitious. He's starving. And Emily's feeding it. Back then, I brushed it off, thought she was too harsh. But rereading her letter in the stillness of morning, I knew she wasn't cynical. She was exact. Her real gift to me wasn't the land, it was silence. Space to wait, to choose, to protect without proving. I tucked the letter into the wooden box under my bed, the one lined with lavender and old photos. Not even Ivy knew about it. I never spoke of it, not when Michael mentioned property taxes, not when Emily asked about that extra lot near the valley. I smiled, shrugged, pretended to forget. Because Claire was right. Silence isn't weakness. It's the last gate guarding your freedom. So I stayed quiet, even when Emily arrived at my retirement party with her lawyer. And when weeks later an invitation appeared, dinner Friday, just us. Ivy's at a sleepover. I hesitated. Just us. Too staged, too curated. But I went. Sometimes you learn more by letting people serve the meal. Their house smelled of cinnamon and performance. Candles flickered on Emily's centerpiece of white tulips. She greeted me in silk, Peter hovering nearby, his hand resting on her chair like punctuation. Dinner began with red wine and small talk. How's the garden, Mom? Still with your book club? The tone was measured, client-like. The salad was perfect, arugula, parmesan, cranberries. Emily always did her homework. By the roast, the talk slid to how the neighborhood was changing fast. Just before dessert, Michael reached across the table for my hand. It startled me. He used to do that during storms as a boy. Now it felt rehearsed. We just want to be sure you're comfortable, Mom. You've done so much for us. His green eyes looked at me but didn't see me. They were waiting. Emily rose, documents in hand. For convenience and safety, maybe we should jointly own your house. That way, if repairs or emergencies come up, we're legally allowed to step in. She slid the lavender folder toward me, its tabs like white flags. It's not permanent. Just precaution. I set my fork down. A low hum filled my ears, not anger, but recognition. The same buzz of fluorescent lights in an empty office long after the work is done. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. Instead, I calmly reached for my purse, set my wallet on the table, and stood. I think I'm full, I said. Full of dinner, and of pretense. Michael looked down. Emily froze. We're just trying to help, Margaret, she said tight. Of course, I nodded. And I appreciate it. But I'll finish dessert at home. I left without slamming the door. Some silences aren't meant to be filled, they're meant to echo. That night the house felt heavier, dense with the weight of polite betrayals. In my study, I pulled the chain on the brass lamp. Dust shimmered in the light, and for once I let it stay. I reached beneath the drawer for the black binder labeled in Claire's handwriting, Lighthouse. She called the land that not because it had a beacon, but because she said it saved her in the dark. Inside were her notes, letters, and legal documents. Every conversation with Judith Harper was logged, dates, terms, contingencies. I flipped through them slowly, like stones across a riverbed. Then I opened my old laptop, the secure folder marked Inheritance Trust Harper, and began clause by clause. The trust Claire designed was airtight, notarized, anonymized through an offshore entity. Even Michael didn't know. Even the land's true name had been erased years ago. Her voice echoed in my head. Family can become greedy, Margaret. But the law, when used right, is your quiet weapon. So I acted. I updated my will. I removed Michael as medical proxy. I revoked Emily from every emergency contact form. I transferred durable power of attorney to Judith's office. I created a protected trust for Ivy, untouchable until adulthood. And finally, I issued my directive. all real property gifted by Claire M. Ledford shall remain unencumbered, safeguarded under the Lighthouse Foundation, and shielded from all claims, familial or otherwise. When I finished, the cursor blinked like a heartbeat in the quiet room. I sent the packet to Judith's encrypted email, then picked up my landline, the one everyone forgot I still had. She answered after 2 rings, calm as ever. "It's done," I said. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Not angry. Just ready. Then I'll proceed here." "Are you prepared if they push back?" "Yes. Especially emotionally." There was a pause. Then she asked softly, "Are you ready to stop surviving and start owning again?" I looked around the room at the binders, the photo of Claire, the untouched shelves I once meant to donate. I smiled. Not to fight, but to finally claim the space I still breathe in. Judith said nothing for a moment, then, "That's all I needed to hear." I hung up and pulled out a crisp envelope from a legal stationery set. I addressed it carefully, Riverside Law Group, Emily Lawson and Michael Lawson, revocation of financial authority requests. Inside, I enclosed a formal letter from a separate firm, not Judith's, for insulation. It read, "Our client, Mrs. Margaret Collins, declines any power of attorney or shared ownership agreements. Please direct future communications to our office. Further solicitation may be considered undue pressure." Quiet, firm, legally sound. I sealed it, set it on the hall console for mailing. As I climbed the stairs, I didn't feel triumphant or rebellious, just balanced. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was setting terms. The next morning at sunrise, a faint knock drew me to the door. No visitor, just a courier envelope stamped priority legal mail. I knew before I opened it. Still, I set it on the counter, brewed mint tea, and only after the second sip did I slit it open. Everett & Cole LLP, Family Representation Division, on behalf of Mr. Michael Lawson and Mrs. Emily Lawson. Inside was 3 pages of polished fonts, softened legal phrasing. But the message was plain, a proactive financial stewardship proposal, with Michael co-managing significant financial transactions and property decisions. In the second paragraph, a polite nod to cognitive health risks and isolation. A bullet point list urging proactive steps. I almost admired their finesse, concern dressed as control, help cloaked in gentle tyranny. I read the letter twice more, pausing at one phrase, "Our clients act out of love and duty, motivated by safety rather than authority." Duty. Love. Lovely shields for entitlement. I folded the letter, pulled a sheet of ivory stationery, and wrote a single sentence. "Some people say they worry about you, but what they really fear is you remembering what you own." I signed it simply, M. Then I tucked their letter and my note into an envelope addressed to Judith's office. She'd know what to do. I thought of all the birthdays Michael had missed, all the times Emily had smiled while suggesting I simplify my affairs. I walked the envelope to the mailbox. No fanfare, no hesitation. The wind rattled leaves along the sidewalk, and I felt calm. Back home, I lit a candle in the study and sat by the window. Sunlight spilled across the bookshelf, catching Claire's portrait. I kept it quiet, I whispered. "Just like you said. Silence isn't surrender. It's a map." And I was following mine, one deliberate step at a time. I still remember that autumn afternoon with Claire, late sun gilding the river, tall grass whispering. Her scarf fluttered as her voice softened with age. She'd been called many names in the business press, but the one they never argued was the riverfront queen. She built an empire on vision, buying undervalued land near the Eastern Water Corridor long before anyone else believed in it. Men twice her age tried to outmaneuver her. None succeeded, until the markets cracked, the board turned, and the crown she'd built was stripped in scandal. The headlines screamed collapse, but I saw something else. I saw my sister still standing. Months after it all crumbled, Claire and I sat side by side on one of the last parcels still under her name. No fences, no development, just wind, earth, and her. She handed me lukewarm coffee and leaned back. "I lost the headlines," she said. "I lost the buildings and the admiration." Then she smiled faintly. "But I kept 2 things, Margaret. And this land." I didn't answer. "Some truths don't need echoing," she whispered. "I'm leaving it to you. Not because of its value. One day it'll be worth something, but that's not the point. I'm leaving it because you never wanted my empire, You just wanted me at Sunday lunch. Her laugh faded. Promise me you'll keep it quiet. I nodded. 3 weeks later, she collapsed at a planning conference. A heart worked too hard, for too long. Gone before the ambulance arrived. Back in my living room, the air smelled of cedar and old books. I reached for the leather ledger Claire gave me 5 years earlier. Inside, stitched into a hidden fold, was a document I'd only dared glance at twice. Certificate of Land Ownership, Claire Hart Foundation. Trustee, Margaret Collins. 312 acres. Riverfront East Development. Valuation, $97.8 million. The Claire Hart Foundation, a blend of our names, was the shell Judith helped set up, separating the land from family claims. Michael didn't know. Emily wouldn't understand. They talk about my health, my age, as though I were fading. But this land isn't acreage, it's memory, dignity, a promise. Claire's voice returned to me. I'm not giving you land. I'm giving you peace. I tucked the certificate back into the ledger and locked the drawer. Some truths live deeper than stories others try to rewrite. I carry them in ink, in soil, in silence. It was a Thursday when Emily arrived unannounced, Ivy skipping beside her in sparkly sneakers, pie in hand. Hope it's not a bad time, she said, stepping in before I could answer. Apple pie. Ivy and I baked this morning. I peeled the apples myself, Grandma, Ivy beamed. That's very kind, sweetheart, I said warmly, leading them to the kitchen. We sat at the table as the kettle began to sing. The crust was uneven, golden, real. Whipped cream? I asked. No, thank you, Emily said quickly, her eyes drifting over the room, landing a beat too long on Claire's photo tucked among books. Once Ivy was busy coloring, Emily folded her napkin slowly. Your house is lovely. Timeless. I've been thinking about family, about legacy. She cleared her throat. You had a sister, didn't you? Claire. I set my fork down, poured tea. Yes. She passed some years ago. I read about her once. She was successful in real estate. She made a name and lost it. But that's not what made her memorable. Emily's smile tightened. I just meant, she must have left something. Assets? Properties? Anything still in probate? I cut another slice for Ivy, humming softly as she drew a tree with pink leaves and a crooked heart. The things Claire left, I said quietly, are exactly where she meant them to be. Undisturbed. Emily's smile stiffened further. I only bring it up because, if you plan to share with us, this would be the safest time, legally, no confusion later. I brushed crumbs from my skirt and met her eyes. I'm sure you think so. Grandma, do you like it? Ivy held up her drawing. I do. It's beautiful, I told her, smiling genuinely. Emily barely glanced at the picture. She hadn't come for pie or crayons. My eyes stayed on Ivy. Children shouldn't have to unlearn love just because adults forget how to show it, I said gently. Emily blinked, confused. I let it sit before finishing. When kids grow up hearing words soaked in greed, they stop trusting silences. They start mistaking manipulation for care. And slowly, they forget how to listen to someone's heart instead of their wallet. Emily didn't answer, though the corner of her mouth twitched. I gathered the dishes. If something worries you, Emily, I said without turning, speak plainly. Not through pastry. She rose, adjusting her coat. I only wanted to keep things open. The door's always open, I replied, for those who knock with sincerity. As she called Ivy to pack her crayons, I caught the faintest flicker of unease. She hadn't gotten what she came for, and she knew I knew. After the door closed, I leaned against it. In my home, pie means comfort. Tonight, it tasted like warning. The phone rang just before 9. Mrs. Collins, a man said, this is Craig from East Valley Community Bank. I'm calling to confirm the request to change ownership on your savings account ending in 4079. I froze. Change the ownership? Yes, ma'am. We received an authorization form yesterday naming Michael Collins as primary holder. We just need your verbal confirmation. My voice was steady. I never made that request. Put a hold on everything immediately. The line went quiet then. Of course. Would you like to review in person? Yes. Today. I dressed carefully, slate blouse, hair brushed into a low knot. If I was walking into betrayal, I'd do it standing tall. At the bank, muted jazz drifted through the lobby. Craig met me with a folder. We received this via email, supposedly signed by you and witnessed by your son. He handed it over. My name was there, mimicked but wrong. The pressure uneven, the angle off. A forgery. Michael's name appeared beside it as witness. The audacity hollowed me out. I want a copy, I said. And flag my file. No one touches my accounts without me, in person. Craig nodded quickly. That night Judith sat with me in my living room. I handed her the form. She read in silence. Well, she said at last, that crosses a line. It erases the line, I replied. We'll file a cease and desist, alert the fraud unit, prepare an affidavit. If they tried once, they'll try again. I nodded. They didn't even wait for me to die, Judith. They just counted on silence. We sat in the kind of quiet where grief cools into resolve. I told myself Emily was opportunistic, Michael weak. But this wasn't weakness. This was theft disguised as care. Betrayal disguised as love. Judith set down her glass. We'll handle it. But prepare yourself. If they think you're vulnerable, this is just the beginning. I'm not vulnerable, I said softly. I'm awake. She smiled faintly. Then we'll make sure they know it, legally and permanently. By morning, the letters were drafted, to the bank, to Everett and Cole. Everything in motion. At my desk, I whispered what I'd long avoided. I'm not afraid of losing them anymore. Because somewhere along the way, I already did. A week later, Ivy's school asked if I'd volunteer as a grandparent chaperone for her class picnic. I said yes without hesitation. For once, I could enter her world without Emily filtering every moment. The air was crisp, sunlight warming the dew. Oaks stretched wide over the park as children laughed, tossed breadcrumbs to ducks. Ivy spotted me, floppy blue hat tilted, rainbow buttons on her cardigan. Her face lit up, and she ran into my arms. "Grandma," she cried, hugging me tight. For a moment, all the legal battles vanished. We found a quiet spot under an elm. She colored while I laid out our lunch, heart-shaped jam sandwiches, carrot sticks, cinnamon apples. "What's this one, Grandma?" she asked, pointing to a scribble. I squinted. "Looks like a dragon hiding behind a mountain." She giggled. "It's a bunny in a blanket." We laughed together, her giggles like wind chimes. Then, as she reached for her juice, I finally asked the question that had sat heavy in my chest. "Ivy," I said gently, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "Of course. If someone hid a very precious gem deep underground, so no one could find it, do you think others should dig it up?" She blinked. "Did someone lose it?" "No," I said softly. "It was hidden on purpose. To keep it safe." She considered carefully, chewing her lip. "No," Ivy said after a long pause. "If someone hid it, it belongs to them, right?" My chest tugged as I smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. That's what I believe too." She leaned her head against my arm. "Some people want things just because they're shiny." I chuckled. "You're wiser than most grown-ups." We sat quietly, watching a boy chase butterflies, failing every time because of his noise. I studied Ivy's profile, so young, yet carrying instincts her parents had forgotten. "Does everyone in our family love shiny things?" she asked. Her voice carried a weight beyond her age. "Sometimes adults forget not everything shiny is good," I told her. "They think owning makes them safer, more important. But real treasures," I squeezed her hand, "can't be bought or taken." She didn't answer, just looked at me with a solemnity that broke and lifted me at once. Then she flipped her page. "Guess what this one is?" she asked, pointing to another scribble. I laughed. "A bunny hiding behind a mountain?" "Nope. A dragon wrapped in a blanket." I laughed harder, a sound so unfiltered it startled me. Ivy giggled, proud. When it was time to pack up, she slipped her hand into mine. "I like it when it's just us, Grandma." "I do too, sweetheart." Then she asked, "Do shiny things make people stop loving?" I crouched to meet her eyes. No, honey. But wanting them too badly can make people forget how to love. Something passed between us, unspoken, but real. As the teacher called them back, Ivy waved. Don't worry, Grandma. I'll help you guard the treasure. I pressed my hand to my chest. Sometimes the fiercest allies are the smallest ones. Emily invited me to lunch again, this time at a sleek downtown bistro. White walls, curated art, the kind of menu that valued style over taste. I knew it wasn't about food. She greeted me with polished grace, but her eyes carried performance. At the table already sat a sharply dressed man in his 30s. This is Calvin Rowe from Hargrave Legal, she said lightly. Just a friendly consult. Pleasantries were short. Calvin slid a manila folder toward me. Mrs. Collins, this is a standard family settlement agreement. A settlement for what? I asked. Emily leaned forward. We want to resolve things peacefully before misunderstandings grow. Calvin continued smoothly. If you disclose and share certain undeclared assets, especially property once in your sister's name, we'll consider it resolved without further pursuit. I leaned back. Undeclared assets? Emily folded her hands. We believe there may be holdings, specifically land near Lake Redmore. Its value is considerable. Transparency would help everyone. I opened the folder. Neat paragraphs proposed division of heritage-based holdings, 35% to Michael and Emily, contingent on my cooperation. I closed it. You said pursuit. What exactly are you pursuing? Calvin raised his hands. Nothing yet. But if property like Redmore was transferred improperly, it could raise questions. My sister's estate was handled lawfully, with counsel, I said evenly. The land was placed years ago into a private trust. It's no longer personal property. Not mine, not theirs. Not your business. Calvin blinked, uncertainty flickering. Emily's smile thinned. Margaret, she said softly, we only want to protect your legacy before someone else steps in. You mean before I die? She stayed silent. I stood, set the folder back on the table. If you want to sue me, go ahead. But bring someone older next time. Someone who remembers what integrity smells like. Emily flinched. And as for legacy, mine isn't negotiated over lunch. It's written by how I respond when silence is mistaken for surrender. I glanced at her one last time. By the way, there's jam on your teeth from pretending to care. Clean it before your next performance. I left, heels clicking louder than a gavel. Outside, the sun was warm. I breathed not like someone cornered, but like someone stepping fully into her name again. That Tuesday evening, rain tapped gently at the windows. Chamomile steeped when the side doorbell rang. A courier handed me an envelope stamped with a court seal. I opened it calmly, notice of petition for conservatorship. Filed by Michael Collins and Emily Collins. Reason, memory loss, confusion, financial mismanagement. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. They weren't circling anymore. They were diving. I sat, the pages trembling in my lap. Not with fear, but with something sharper. I dialed Judith. She picked up instantly. They went through with it, I said. Her voice hardened. Then that was their last move. Desperate. And stupid. I traced the court seal with my fingertip. They were calling me senile, a danger to my own finances. Judith's voice cut sharp. You've never missed a payment. Same CPA for 15 years. Estate plan notarized with witnesses. Clean cognition tests, every one of them. I still remember my childhood phone number, I said with a half smile. She didn't laugh. We'll respond, she promised. Not with outrage. Proof, precision, timing. I nodded. Not with noise, but with the sound of a knock on the courtroom door. The next morning, I opened the wooden box Claire had left me. Inside were family documents, journals, recordings. But I added my own, signed evaluations from Dr. Nelson, twice a year for 3 years, no impairment, receipts and transaction logs showing clear financial judgment, and transcripts of every manipulative call from Michael and Emily. Then I retrieved the hidden camera files from under my kitchen shelf. One in particular, Emily leaning close over lemon tart, whispering, if you really loved Michael, you'd sign the co-ownership forms. It's not like you're using that house anymore. The video caught her tone, her pressure, my silence. I printed it, then destroyed the backup drive. Not fear, focus. On Friday, Judith and I sorted everything into labeled folders: medical, financial, audio, visual. A notarized letter from Dr. Nelson stating clearly, no cognitive deficiencies. A sworn letter from my estate planner. Judith looked at me. You don't have to appear. We can file this as a counter. I shook my head. No. I want them to see me, standing, coherent, alive. Not a rumor. Me. She smiled, the kind of smile that means a client has become a friend. Then Monday we'll file. The hearing would come soon. I stared at the folders, thinking of all the years I'd taught Michael right from wrong. Somewhere he decided ambition meant rewriting rules, and rewriting me. But I wasn't a footnote. I was the author, and I'd never stopped writing. Before sunrise, I packed a folding chair and Claire's fountain pen, then drove to the land. The fields stretched wild with late summer grass, the lake shining like a secret. I parked beneath the old sycamore where Claire and I once buried a box of promises. Her heels had left a faint dent in the soil, as if the land remembered her better than people did. I unfolded my chair, opened my notebook, and wrote. To the sister I once thought I was smaller than, you were bigger, louder, wealthier. But you didn't shrink me, you gave me room to grow. When the world turned its back, I stayed. Not out of duty, but understanding. This land isn't money, it's memory, quiet, choice. I never told them, not because I feared them, but because I feared losing what little of you I had left. Tomorrow I walk into court, not to fight, but to be seen. If the world forgets you again, let this land be your voice. Let my silence be your legacy. I signed it, folded the page, and slid it into a tin envelope. Then I crouched at the sycamore's base, where Claire once carved a hollow with her pocketknife. We'd called it our pact tree. We had written there once, no matter how loud the world gets, we will never betray each other in silence. I tucked the letter into the hollow of the tree and whispered, still true. The wind stirred the tall grass like a gentle hand through gray hair. I sat there for a while, letting the quiet rebuild me. By the time I got home, the sun leaned west. Judith was waiting with a leather folder. Everything's ready, she said. Affidavits, recordings, medical reports, even a letter from Ivy's principal confirming my visits, readings, and donations. I smiled. You didn't miss a thing. She nodded. I couldn't afford to. And neither could you. The folder was perfect, every tab and transcript in place, the architecture of a woman who hadn't just survived but paid attention. Judith studied me. You sure you're ready? Tomorrow, I said, closing the folder. They won't see the woman who cried quietly or nodded through betrayal. Tomorrow, they'll meet me. The courtroom was small and beige, deliberately neutral. I sat with Judith. Across the room, Michael, Emily, and their lawyer, too polished for this place. It wasn't a trial, just a conservatorship hearing, but it felt heavier than any trial I'd ever witnessed. Michael spoke first, rehearsed concern in his voice. Your Honor, we're here out of love. My mother's isolated, refusing visits and help. It's not about money, it's about safety. Emily followed, sharper. No aid, no alert system, limited family contact, questionable donations, unexplained legal fees. We worry she's vulnerable. Their lawyer echoed them smoothly, requesting limited conservatorship over my finances, including authority to co-manage assets and review undeclared property. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Collins, do you wish to respond? Yes, Your Honor. Judith slid me the folder. I kept my voice calm. This is an independent cognitive exam by Dr. Selma Howard, 3 weeks ago. Full clarity, no signs of decline. The judge read, then nodded. This is a 6-month bank statement. All transactions are mine, deliberate. The donations were to Ivy's school and 2 women's shelters, with full consent. The lawyer shifted. Emily avoided my eyes. And finally, I said, holding up a flash drive, a short recording from my home. It played over the speakers, Emily's voice, clear as day. If you transfer partial ownership of the property quietly, we won't have to involve the courts. You don't need the land. You need rest. You've lived your life. Then my voice followed, calm. You're asking me to trade silence for ownership. That's not peace. The room went still. The judge looked at me, then at them. I folded my hands. I never asked them for money, time, or favors. Only respect. Respect for the life I've lived and the choices I'm still entitled to make. Mrs. Collins, the judge asked, do you feel your well-being is endangered? Not physically, I said, but my dignity is, and that I intend to keep. The judge removed her glasses. I find no basis for conservatorship. Furthermore, given the audio and documents under seal, I am ordering an inquiry into possible forgery and unauthorized attempts to access assets. Michael shrank into himself, shoulders folded like surrender. Emily erupted. She shot to her feet. This is ridiculous. She baited us, planned it all, recordings, paper trails. She trapped us. I stayed seated, calm. When the judge raised her hand, I met Emily's eyes. It wasn't a trap. It was a boundary. For the first time, she froze, disbelief flickering across her face. Then she stormed out, heels striking like angry punctuation. Michael followed, slower, eyes on the floor. The gavel came down once. The hearing was over. But for me, something else was just beginning. Judith leaned close. You okay? More than okay, I whispered. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stepped out of the role they wrote for me, the aging woman too gentle to resist. They mistook silence for surrender. But my silence had always been strength. Outside, the autumn air was sharp, leaves rushing across the sidewalk like urgent whispers. I didn't look for them. I didn't care which car they left in. What mattered was the stillness in my chest. The space where fear used to sit now felt like freedom. 30 days later, I decided to throw the retirement party I actually wanted. Not at the house with manicured lawns, not in a banquet hall with polite smiles. This time, it would be mine. I chose a sunlit common room at the Marigold, a home for widowed women. Many had been forgotten by their children, but their eyes still carried fire, some sharper than Judith's. I'd been funding the place quietly through the Claire Hart Foundation, just as Claire would have wanted. The staff set up folding chairs, vases of daisies, and pitchers of lemonade. Finger sandwiches, peach cobbler, and an old jazz record spinning in the corner, nothing fancy, but honest. Judith arrived first with a store-bought pie and a smile that made up for it. Is this retirement? She teased. No, I said. This is coming home. Then came the others, Elaine in her pink cardigan, once a poet, now abandoned by her son. Nancy, cane in hand, sharp as ever, running bingo like board meetings. Lucille, lipstick flawless, 3 husbands behind her. And Ivy, my granddaughter, braids crooked, socks unmatched, clutching a paper and a tin of cookies. Perfect. I stood near the fireplace. I didn't plan a speech, I said. Silence often says enough. But today is different. Thank you for showing up, in your lives, and here, for proving strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's simply where you choose to sit, who you trust, what you carry forward. I turned to Ivy. She climbed on a stool and read, voice trembling but steady. Dear Grandma, I don't know much about land or money, but I know you never lied to me. Not once. You told me when the pie crust was burnt, when you were tired, even when you were scared but brave anyway. That's how I know you're the strongest person in the room. I love you. Love, Ivy. There wasn't a dry eye. I pulled her close. Judith wiped her face, blaming the air. I laughed, the kind that comes from somewhere long hidden. Raising my glass of lemonade, I said, thank you for being here. Not in a courtroom, not in headlines, but in this simple joy. I thought I had to disappear to stay safe. I was wrong. I just had to choose the right people. Applause filled the room, gentle and real. Surrounded by women who knew betrayal and still chose connection, I felt belonging. Claire would have laughed. She always said I'd never slow down enough to realize I was home. But I had. Back home, the house no longer felt silent, it felt spacious. In the study, I opened the safe behind Claire's photo. Inside, the contract transferring the lakefront land into the Claire Hart Foundation, untouchable by greed. And the blueprint, our dream of a healing center for women like us. Counseling rooms, art studios, gardens, a library, a lakeside path. People said Claire lost everything. She didn't. She gave it away. I typed the first Claire Hart newsletter. We begin together. To whom it may empower, I wrote. I once stayed silent because I thought survival meant shrinking. But today I write to say we are not invisible. This center is not bricks and permits, it's a reclamation of dignity. My name is Margaret Collins. I was nearly erased by the people I trusted most. But I've written a new beginning. With gratitude and fierce hope, Margaret. I hit send. No fanfare, no revenge. Just a woman at her desk, setting shame alight with one click. I whispered to Claire's memory. We did it. The next morning by the lake, Ivy wore overalls and sunflower gloves, holding an apple sapling. Is this where you and Aunt Claire used to sit? She asked. Yes, I said. We called it the quiet edge of the world. Together we dug, placed the tree, and pressed the soil around its roots. Who owns this land now? She asked. I looked at the lake, at the future center rising, at the bench we once called our court of dreams. This land belongs to those who haven't given up hope. To those who rebuild after being torn down. And it can belong to you, if you protect it for love, not power. I promise, she whispered, hugging me. But please don't leave me. I held her tight. I never left. I was just quiet for a while. The little apple tree stood beside us, its roots starting a journey we might never see, but had chosen to believe in. That was the legacy Claire and I built, not court papers, not wealth, but love passed down quietly, like seeds waiting for spring. As Ivy played in the dirt, I sat on the bench and watched the light shimmer on the water. It felt like Claire's laughter, like something lost returning in peace. Silence had been my armor. Now, it was soil for something new. A healing orchard, a foundation for others like me, and one little girl who still believed a tree could change the world. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've been through something like this, share your story in the comments.